Okay, so today we're going to be talking about completing the square, which is super helpful. But before we do that, we're going to look at some examples, and that will help us to understand how to complete the square. So if I said to you, expand x plus 3 squared, you would probably know that to expand this, you've got to do x plus 3, x plus 3. And then if you want to expand that out, you can get x squared, because x times x, plus 3x, and then plus the other 3x, plus 9. And then if you collect all those guys up, you'll get x squared, and then 3x plus 3x is 6x, and plus 9. So that's how you'd expand that. Okay, so if you were asked to factorize, say, x squared plus 6x plus 9, you can see that from what we've just done, you're going to look to half this guy, okay? And this is because the coefficient of x squared is 1. This only works, this idea of halving this guy, if the coefficient of x squared is 1. And so sometimes it won't be, but we'll look at an example like that later. But when it is, you can just half this, and then inside the brackets, you can just have x plus half of that is 3 squared. And that will work with, well, everything. Like this one, x squared plus 10x plus 25. The coefficient of x squared is 1, so you can just half 10x. And inside the bracket, you'll have x plus half 10 is 5 squared. And you can check that, right? If you're in doubt, just expand this out. You get x squared plus 5x plus another 5x plus 5 times 5, which is 25. And let's say you're asked to simplify this. We've already kind of done it up here. We've got an x squared, we've got a 10x. But what we're looking at here is 25 is 3 bigger than 22. So we're going to use the fact that this is x plus 5 squared. And we're gonna keep the x plus 5 squared, and that's going to give us x squared plus 10x plus 25. And we're going to take away 3, okay? Because 25 minus 3 is 22. And so that's what we're doing when we're completing the square. We're using what we know, that x plus 5 squared is going to be x squared plus 10x plus 25. And we're going to adapt it to what we've been given. Say plus 22. Well, we say, well, we're going to want to take off 3 here. Okay, so let's say I gave you this guy right here, x squared plus 8x plus 16 equals 0. And I asked you to find the solutions to this equation using completing the square, okay? So with what we just looked at, we can see that the coefficient of the x term, this guy, is 1. So that means we can go right into completing the square. And so we're going to look at this guy here, 8x. And remember what I said, this is always going to be double what we're going to have inside the brackets. So we're going to do x plus 4 squared. And if we think about expanding this back out to check, we're going to get x squared plus 4x plus another 4x, and then plus 4 times 4, which is 16. So quite lucky that this has worked out quite nicely, because we already had the 16, which is what we're going to get. So we see that these two things are equal, so we can write that equals 0 as well. And then quite easily we can see that the solution to this is going to be x is minus 4. And again, we've only got one solution here. But sometimes the numbers don't work out that nicely. Let's say I gave you x squared plus 8x plus 14 and told you to solve that equaling 0, okay? So what we've just done is going to be really helpful though. So we can see that the x squared plus 8x plus 16 is very similar, and it's going to help us. So let's say we want this to be 14. We don't want it to be 16. And so let's say we just took 2 from both sides. We did x plus 4 squared minus 2 equals this guy minus 2. So instead of 16, we're going to have 14 here. Okay, and so that's quite helpful because we've got these guys, they're the same. And so we've learned that x plus 4 squared minus 2 equals 0. So we're going to rewrite that. X plus 4 squared minus 2 equals 0. Okay, what we've just done is we've completed the square. Look, it was pretty easy, right? And so that has made it a lot easier to solve for this. because now we can add 2 to both sides, we'll get x plus 4 squared equals 2. And then we're going to take the square root of both sides. X plus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 2. And then we're going to take away 4 from both sides. Okay, so we're going to get x equals minus 4 plus or minus the square root of 2. And so that would be really difficult if we were asked to factorize it. So this is an example of where completing the square is very helpful. As instead of factorizing, we've completed the square and we've ended up with a pretty nasty answer that we wouldn't have been able to find factorizing. Okay, let's look at another example. This time we've got x squared minus 6x plus 3 equals 0. Okay, so just as before, we can see that the coefficient on the x squared term is 1. And so that means we can just look at this guy and half it and put that in the brackets, okay? So let's just see what x minus 3 squared looks like. Maybe we'll get lucky and it'll be easy, okay? So skipping a few steps, it's going to be x squared minus 3x minus another 3x. So it's going to be minus 6x. And then minus 3 times minus 3 is plus 9. Okay, so these two are a little bit different, all right? So we can't just put this guy and say that it's x minus 3 squared. But what we can do is say, okay, let's take away 6 from both sides. Okay, let's put a minus 6 in there. Then we can see that this guy is going to now equal that guy. So we can see that x minus 3 squared minus 6 equals 0. Okay. I hope I've made that as clear as I can. We've just taken 6 off because this is now x squared minus 6x plus 3. And so we've used the fact that this equals 0 and x minus 3 squared minus 6 equals this. Okay? And so that's a lot easier to solve now. Okay, adding 6 to both sides, we'll get x minus 3 squared equals 6. And then x minus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 6. And then x equals, adding 3 to both sides, x equals plus or minus the square root of 6. Okay, final example. Let's say you were given this guy, 2x squared plus 8x plus 5, and you were asked to simplify that. Okay, and you can see that we're not solving an equation here. We're being asked to simplify. So there's no equals 0 here. We're just being asked to simplify it through completing the square or completion of the square. I don't know, whatever it's called. And so we can see that this one's a little bit different because the coefficient of the x squared term is 2 and not 1. But that's okay, because what we can do is we're going to have to divide through by 2. Okay. But that's a little bit awkward because we've got this 5 here, and that's not a multiple of 2. So you could just write 5 over 2, but we're not going to do that because it looks a little bit ugly, okay? So what we're going to do instead is we're going to look at this guy here. We're going to take a factor of 2 out. So we're going to get x squared, and then half of 8 is 4, so x squared plus 4x, okay? And so we can check that that's right, because if we wanted to expand that, we'd get 2x squared plus 8x, which is what we've got. And then we've got to remember our 5 on the end. Okay. So now we can focus on this bit here for completing the square. So we see, ignoring the 2, okay, ignore the 2, sorry, that the coefficient is back at 1. Okay, so we can complete the square on this guy here. Okay, so we're going to write 2 out here, and then we're going to do a big bracket like that to show that we're going to have x plus half of 4, which is 2, squared. But the reason we've got this big bracket here is because if you've noticed, this does not equal this. Okay, x plus 2 squared is going to be x squared plus 4x, and then at the end we're going to have a plus 4. So we've actually got 4 too many compared to what we've got here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take off 4. Okay, now we can see that this bit here is the same as this bit here. Okay, and then we're going to close the big brackets, and then we're going to add plus 5 to it. Okay, and so we can make this look a little bit simpler. We're going to expand the brackets out a little bit. So we're still going to have 2, and then we're going to keep this guy here. We're going to have x plus 2 squared. But what we want to do is we want to expand out the minus 4. Okay, so 2 times minus 4, we're going to get minus 8. Let me do that in red. Minus 8, and then we've got the plus 5 on the end. Okay, and then we're going to simplify that even more. 2 times x plus 2 squared, and then combine these into 1, we're going to get minus 3. Okay, and that's as far as we need to go because we weren't asked to solve anything. We were just asked to simplify it. So by completing the square, what we've done is we've shown that 2x squared plus 8x plus 5 equals this guy here, 2 times x plus 2 squared minus 3. And so let's say your exam asks you to put, let's say it asks you to express, this guy as, or in the form of ax plus b squared plus c. Okay, what you can do is you can complete the square like we did, and we can say, well, in our case, a is 2, and then b is also 2, and c is minus 3. So if you saw that in an exam, you'd be like, wow, that's really scary. I don't know what to do. But what you want to do is you want to complete the square and then compare what you've got. All right, I hope this helped a little bit. If you have any questions, then you can leave a comment and I'll answer it. But yeah, completing the square is super helpful because it can speed things up a lot. Instead of factorizing, if we have nasty answers, completing the square can help us out. And it also can help us to derive the quadratic formula, which we can look at next time.